Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
I want you to picture a scenario. It's a scenario that I think every single person listening to this has experienced at least once, and if you're anything like me, probably 100 times.
Oh, I think I know where you're going with this.
You're at the gym, the air is, a bit thick, smells faintly of rubber and effort. You're on the treadmill, or maybe it's the elliptical, and you are sweating. You are working incredibly hard.
45 minutes in, at least.
Maybe 45 minutes, your legs are burning, you're breathless, and you look down at that little glowing digital console in front of you, and it gives you a number. It says, calories burned, 500.
And that is a moment of absolute victory. You see that number and you feel this tangible sense of accomplishment.
It's true. You look at that number and you do the mental math. Like instantly you think, okay, I burned 500 calories and that muffin I'm eyeing for later is 400 calories.
So I'm in the clear.
Exactly. I've created a deficit. I have banked that energy expenditure. It's just simple addition. It feels like money in the bank.
And that is precisely where the problem lies. Because that number on the console, it's basically a lie. And the math you're doing in your head, it's logically sound, it's intuitive, but from a biological standpoint, it is completely wrong.
That is a devastating way to start. But this is why we're here. Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are tackling what we're calling the calorie compensation paradox. And honestly, this research shook me a little bit because it challenges the fundamental rules we have all been playing by.
It really does.
We're looking at a brand new study published just this month, February 2026, in Current Biology by Herman Poncer and Eric Trexler.
And this is a really significant paper. It's titled The Evidence for Constrained Total Energy Expenditure in Humans and Other Animals. And I mean, it essentially takes the conventional wisdom about how we burn calories.
The wisdom the entire fitness industry is built on.
For decades, yes. And it just turns it completely on its head.
The core conflict here is it's between two different ways of looking at how the human body handles energy. We have the conventional wisdom, which the study calls the additive model, and then the new science, which is the constrained model.
And if the constrained model is right, and this new data is very, very compelling, then we have been fundamentally misunderstanding the relationship between exercise and weight loss.
It explains so much. Like it explains why you can spend months training for a half marathon, putting in all those miles, and then you step on the scale and realize you haven't lost a single pound.
Which is incredibly frustrating. We just assume we aren't working hard enough or, we must be cheating on our diet somewhere.
Right. We blame ourselves.
Precisely. But the mission of this deep dive isn't to tell you to stop exercising. In fact, and this is the important part, by the end of this conversation, you'll see why this new model actually makes exercise more important for your long-term health.
Just not for the reasons we've always thought.
Exactly. Not for the reasons you think.
So let's unpack this. We have to start with the old way, right? The additive model. This is the calories in, calories out. Simple math I was taught in high school health class. It's the math my fitness tracker uses every day.
Right. The additive model is very intuitive because it treats the body like a simple machine. You have your basal metabolic rate, or your BMR, which is the energy you burn just by, existing.
Keeping the lights on.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's the energy for your heart beating, your brain firing, your liver functioning, keeping your body temperature stable. Let's say for a typical person, that's around 2,000 calories a day.
Okay, so that's my baseline. I burn 2,000 calories just lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, doing absolutely nothing.
Exactly. Now, in the additive model, if you go for a run and the physics of moving your body requires 500 calories of work, you just add that on top. 2,000 plus 500 equals 2,500.
It's a straight line. 1 plus 1 equals 2.
It's clean. And this is exactly what every commercial fitness tracker does. It takes your resting metabolism, adds your steps, adds your workout, and gives you a grand total.
And it assumes that those two things, my baseline and my activity, are totally separate. They don't influence each other.
Correct. It assumes they are independent variables. It assumes they don't talk to each other. If you do more activity, the total burn goes up by exactly that amount. It suggests that our energy expenditure is, in theory, limitless. If you ran enough, you could burn 10,000 calories a day.
But nature, as it turns out, is a little more complicated than that. So enter the constrained model. This is the core of the Poncer and Trexler paper. What is the constraint?
The constrained model suggests that the body essentially has a budget ceiling. It defends a surprisingly narrow range of total energy expenditure. It refuses to let your daily burn just keep rising indefinitely because you decided to take up jogging.
So, okay, let's use the same numbers. I have my 2,000 calorie baseline. I go run, and that run costs 500 calories. The additive model says my new total is 2,500. What does the constrained model say?
The constrained model says, wait a minute, 2,500 is too expensive. We can't afford that. So the body lets you do the running. You obviously burn the energy to move. Physics still applies. But to balance the books, it aggressively, and I mean aggressively, cuts spending somewhere else.
It robs Peter to pay Paul.
That's exactly it. You burn 500 on the run, so the body might downregulate other invisible internal systems by, say, 150 calories. So instead of your total daily burn hitting 2,500, maybe it only hits 2,350.
So there's like a metabolic tax or, I don't know, energy embezzlement.
I like that, energy embezzlement. Think of it like a household budget. You have a fixed monthly income, right? That's your body's energy limit. If you suddenly decide to spend a huge amount of money on entertainment, that's your exercise, you don't magically get a raise.
No, you have to cut back somewhere else.
To avoid going bankrupt, you have to cut the utility bill. You have to turn off the lights in rooms you're not using. You stop spending on, like, general home maintenance.
So the body is a miserly accountant. It sees me spending all this energy on the treadmill, and it panics, so it starts turning down the dimmer switches on other internal processes to save some cash.
Precisely. And this isn't just a theory anymore. This is the key. This new study in current biology really brings the receipts. It puts hard data to the concept.
Let's get into that data set then, because that's what makes this 2026 paper so powerful, right?
Yeah.
They didn't just look at a dozen college students jogging for a week.
No, not at all. Poncer and Trexler performed a massive analysis, a meta-analysis. They looked at 14 different human studies that involved 450 people in all sorts of different exercise programs. But they didn't stop there.
They brought in animals, too.
Yeah, they brought in comparative data from other animal studies, rodents, birds, primates. They wanted to know if this was just some weird human quirk or if it was a universal biological law.
And what did they find? What is the actual tax that the body charges on our exercise? Is there a number?
There is a number, and it's pretty stark. They found that, on average, for every 100 calories you burn during exercise, your total daily energy expenditure only increases by about 72 calories.
Okay, let's pause on that.
Yeah.
That's the rule, the 72% rule.
Right. That's the key takeaway number.
So I go for a run. The treadmill console says 100 calories burned. In reality, my total energy budget for the day only went up by 72.
Correct.
So where did the other 28 calories go?
The other 28 calories were, in effect, erased. The body compensated. It just reduced the energy spent on other background tasks by 28 calories to make up the difference. That is the compensation effect.
Yeah.
You do the work, but you do not get the full credit on your final metabolic bill.
That's almost a 30% reduction in effectiveness, at least if you're looking at it purely from a calorie-burning weight loss perspective.
Exactly. And you have to remember that's an average. We will definitely get into the individual variations later, but as a rule of thumb, it means your wearable tracker is overestimating your total daily burn from activity by at least 30%.
And the paper points out that this isn't just about us being annoyed by our trackers. This is deep evolutionary biology. They brought up something called the zoo paradox, which I found absolutely fascinating.
Yes, this is one of the strongest pieces of evidence for the constrained model. I mean, think about it. If the old additive model were true, the 1 + 1 = 2 model, then a wild animal running around the jungle hunting for food should burn drastically more calories than a captive animal sitting in a zoo enclosure all day.
Right, because the wild animal is doing so much more physical activity.
Yeah.
It seems obvious.
It seems obvious, but when they actually go out and measure it, and they have measured this in ring-tailed lemurs, giant pandas, sheep, even kangaroos, they often find that the total daily energy expenditure is the same.
Wait, hold on. A lazy panda in a zoo and a hardworking panda in the wild burn the same amount of energy per day.
Adjusted for body size, yes. The wild panda spends more energy on movement, so its body spends less on other things. The zoo panda spends almost nothing on movement, so its body ramps up spending on those internal housekeeping tasks. The total budget stays constrained. It's mind-blowing.
It really reinforces this idea that the body has a target number it wants to hit, and it will just manipulate the internal budget to stay there no matter what.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the million-dollar question, or I guess the million-calorie question.
Right.
If the body is saving energy to compensate for my run, what exactly is it turning off? Because if it's turning off my brain or my heart, that sounds pretty dangerous.
It's a biological trade-off, and no, it's not turning off your vital organs. The study identifies several down-regulated systems. When you push physical activity to a high level, the body reduces activity in systems that are not immediately essential for survival in that specific moment.
Okay, so like
Oh.
what? What's on the chopping block?
The big ones are things like cellular repair and general maintenance, inflammation and immune system activity, stress reactivity, so things like your baseline cortisol and epinephrine levels. And in very extreme cases, it can even downregulate reproductive hormones like estrogen and testosterone.
Whoa. Okay, so inflammation and immune response. The body basically says, look, we're spending way too much on running right now, so stop fighting that minor infection quite so hard, or maybe stop keeping the whole system so generally inflamed.
Yes, and this is where we get to the really fascinating part, the twist, the paradox within the paradox.
Which is?
While this metabolic theft is, incredibly annoying for weight loss, it is actually the primary reason that exercise is so good for your long-term health.
Wait, explain that. The compensation, the very thing that's stealing my calorie burn, is the medicine.
Think about chronic inflammation. In the modern world, with our diets and stress, most of us have chronically high levels of low-grade inflammation and stress reactivity. Our internal utility bill is just running too high all the time.
And that leads to heart disease, diabetes, autoimmune issues, all of that.
All of it. So when you exercise, you are forcing the body to adopt the constrained model. You are forcing it to cut the budget for that chronic inflammation. You force it to lower its baseline stress hormones to save energy. The missing calories that you didn't burn are actually a representation of your immune system and your stress response quieting down.
That is actually beautiful. So the reason exercise prevents all these diseases isn't necessarily because we're burning off the junk we eat. It's because the sheer energy demand of the exercise forces the body to stop being so inflamed and reactive just to balance its books.
Exactly. The constrained model explains the powerful link between exercise and longevity far better than the additive model ever could. If the additive model were true, exercise would just be adding more stress to an already stressed system. But because of constraint, exercise actually suppresses those overactive internal systems. It makes us metabolically efficient and calm.
So in a way, we're trading a smaller waistline for a longer, healthier life.
In a sense, yes. But we can't just ignore the waistline part, because that's why most people start exercising. And the paper has some very specific and I'd say somewhat controversial findings about how you exercise.
Yes, section 4 of our outline. Not all exercise is created equal when it comes to this compensation effect. And this was the part that made me want to change my workout routine immediately. We have to talk about aerobic versus resistance training.
This was a very distinct finding in the Ponser and Trexler analysis. They found that energy compensation, that erasure of calories we talked about, is significantly greater in aerobic exercise interventions.
So running, cycling, the elliptical, the classic cardio we all do specifically to lose weight. That is where the compensation effect is the worst.
The data strongly suggests yes. In the cohorts doing aerobic exercise, the compensation was high. The body gets very, very efficient at cutting internal costs when you do that kind of repetitive, steady-state cardio.
But then there's the data on resistance training, lifting weights.
And this was the big surprise. In the resistance training cohorts, they saw what is called negative compensation.
Negative compensation.
Yeah.
That sounds like doublespeak. What on earth does that mean?
It means the total daily energy expenditure went up by more than what the exercise itself was calculated to burn.
Wait a second. So if I go lift weights and the lifting itself burns, say, 200 calories, my day's total energy burn might actually go up by 250.
Potentially, yes. The average in those groups showed that resistance training didn't trigger that same metabolic clawback. In fact, it seemed to boost the overall metabolic rate.
And what's the theory there?
The hypothesis, and Ponser and Trexler discuss this, is that muscle repair is metabolically expensive.
Ah, of course. If I run, when I stop running, I'm pretty much done. But if I lift heavy, my muscles have all these micro tears that need to be rebuilt for the next 24 to 48 hours.
Exactly. That repair process costs energy. It increases the body's utility bill rather than giving it a reason to cut it. So while cardio makes the body thrifty and efficient, lifting might actually keep the body in a state of spending.
That is a massive takeaway. I mean, for anyone listening who has been a cardio bunny their whole life trying to lose weight, you might be triggering the exact biological mechanism that prevents you from burning more fat.
It definitely suggests that for maintaining a high metabolic rate, lifting is superior. But there's another trap the paper highlights, and this one is maybe even more important. It's the dieting trap. This is the double whammy.
This is what most people do, right? January 1st comes around, they say, I'm going to lose 20 pounds. So they cut their calories in half, and they start running 5 miles every single day.
And the data shows that this is the perfect storm for maximum metabolic compensation. The study found that compensation is dramatically amplified when exercise is paired with caloric restriction.
So if you starve the body and force it to move more, it fights back even harder.
Aggressively. When you restrict calories, you're already signaling scarcity and danger to the body. Then you add high activity on top of that, which increases energy demand. The body goes into full-on defensive lockdown. The compensation can approach nearly 100%.
100%. So you're saying the exercise could be adding almost zero to the total daily burn.
In some of the animal studies they cited that involved food restriction, yes. The total energy expenditure completely flatlined. The animals ran more, but the body cut internal costs so drastically that the total daily burn didn't budge an inch.
That explains the dreaded plateau perfectly.
Yeah.
You see people who are eating 1,200 calories and running every single day, and they just stop losing weight. And everyone else thinks they must be lying about what they eat.
But they probably aren't lying. Their body has just become incredibly, exquisitely efficient at not dying. It has balanced its budget by shutting down everything that isn't absolutely essential for survival.
It's pure survival.
It's purely a survival mechanism.
And there's also a timing element here, isn't there? The study mentioned that this compensation doesn't just happen on day one.
That's a really important nuance. The data suggests it takes time for this metabolic adaptation to really kick in. They found that around 15 weeks seems to be a turning point in some of the longer-term studies.
So for the first, say, 3 months of a new program, the additive model might actually work a little bit. You might see some results.
Briefly, yes. This is why so many crash programs often show great initial results for a few weeks and then just stall. The body needs time to assess the new reality and adjust its thermostat. Once it realizes, okay, this high activity level is the new normal, it starts slashing the internal budget.
I want to play devil's advocate for a second. We're talking about averages here. That 28% compensation number. Is that really true for everyone? Because I know people, and I'm sure you do too, who start running and the weight just seems to fall off them.
And that brings us right to the limitation section of the paper, which is crucial. We have to talk about individual variation. The 28% is an average across hundreds of people. But within that average, you have what they call responders and compensators.
Responders and compensators.
A responder is someone whose body, for whatever reason, acts more like the old additive model. They run, they burn, they lose weight. Their metabolism doesn't fight back as hard. A compensator, and unfortunately this seems to be quite common, is someone whose body immediately downregulates other systems at the first sign of increased activity.
Do we know why? Is it genetic or hormonal?
It's likely genetic and almost certainly has a hormonal component. The science isn't fully there yet on why some people defend their energy stores more aggressively than others, but it validates the experience of so many people who feel like they have to work twice as hard for half the results.
They aren't crazy. They might just be high compensators.
Exactly. Their biology is working against their goal.
There was also a measurement challenge they talked about in the study regarding something called NEPA. Could you explain that?
Right. NEPA stands for non-exercise physical activity. This is all the little stuff. Fidgeting, walking to your car, standing up to get a coffee, taking the stairs.
All the movement that isn't a formal workout.
Correct. And one of the early criticisms of this whole idea was that maybe people aren't metabolically compensating, they're just behaviorally compensating.
As in, I went to the gym for an hour this morning, so now I'm tired and I'm going to sit on the couch for the rest of the night instead of, cleaning the house or going for a walk.
Exactly. That's behavioral compensation. But the Ponser and Trexler analysis specifically looked at studies that controlled for this, and they found that generally this wasn't the main driver. The compensation was internal and metabolic. Even when people kept their non-exercise activities steady, their total burn still dropped.
It's not just laziness. It's happening at the cellular level.
Yes. The body is making the changes internally, independent of your conscious behavior.
So Ponser and Trexler, the authors of this paper, what is their big picture take? Why on earth are we built this way? It seems so inefficient for our modern goals.
They argue that this model solves a major evolutionary puzzle. If early humans follow the additive model, if our energy needs just skyrocketed every time we had to go on a long hunt or migrate to a new area, we would have starved to death.
Because food was scarce and unpredictable?
Exactly. We needed a system that could handle prolonged periods of high activity without requiring us to find and eat 5,000 calories of food every single day just to break even. Our survival depended on being efficient.
So our ability to run a marathon on a surprisingly small amount of fuel is actually an evolutionary superpower.
It is the reason we're here. It's what allowed our ancestors to spread across the entire globe. But in our modern environment, with a fast food restaurant on every corner and a desire to be thin, that incredible efficiency becomes a curse.
It's the ultimate irony, isn't it? The very biological trait that ensured our survival is now the thing that frustrates us when we try to fit into our genes.
Precise.
Okay, so let's bring this all home for the listener. We have unpacked the science. We know the treadmill console is, at best, a wild oversimplification. We know the body compensates. What do we actually do with this information? What are the implications for someone listening right now?
Well, the first implication is the most cliche, but it's now scientifically validated by this model more than ever. Weight loss happens in the kitchen, not in the gym.
You cannot outrun a bad diet, literally,
Oh, yeah.
because your body will not let you burn enough calories to do it.
Right. If you are banking on that 500 calories burn to create your daily deficit, you are overestimating your actual increased burn by 30% or potentially even more. You have to assume your exercise calories are largely a bonus or maybe even non-existent when you're doing the math for weight loss.
But, and this is a huge BUT, we are not, under any circumstances, saying people should stop exercising.
No, absolutely not. And I want to be crystal clear on this. The call to action from this is do not stop moving. In fact, move more. But you have to remember the mechanism of compensation.
It's the inflammation, the stress reduction.
Yes. The fact that your body compensates is why exercise is medicine. You want that downregulation of chronic inflammation and baseline stress. That is what protects your heart, your brain, your joints, and your longevity. You should exercise for your cells, not for your waistline.
That is a massive mindset shift. Stop treating exercise as a weight loss calculator and start treating it as a non-negotiable health tool.
And practically speaking, if you do want to manage your weight and keep your metabolism as high as possible, the data from this paper strongly suggests shifting your priority toward resistance training.
Lift heavy things.
Lift heavy things. The negative compensation data indicates that the process of building muscle and the metabolic cost of maintaining that muscle helps defend against that metabolic drop. It might just be the loophole in the constrained model.
So maybe a little less treadmill, a little more barbell. And for God's sakes, stop eating back your exercise calories.
Yes. If you go for an hour run and then you immediately have a big recovery smoothie or a protein bar, you have almost certainly wiped out any tiny deficit you created and then some.
This has been, honestly, it's really validating. I think so many of us feel like failures when the simple math doesn't work out for us. To know that the math itself was broken, not us, is a huge relief.
It should be liberating. It removes the guilt and helps you focus your energy and attention on what actually works.
I want to leave the listener with a final thought, something to chew on. We've spent this time talking about how the human body aggressively defends against burning extra energy. We call obesity an epidemic, a disease. But if we look at it through the lens of this constrained model, isn't the body just doing exactly what it was designed to do?
That's a very provocative question.
I mean, we have these ancient bodies designed to survive scarcity by holding on to every last bit of energy at all costs. And we've put those bodies into a world of infinite calories and sedentary jobs. Is the obesity epidemic actually a sign that our bodies are working perfectly, just in completely the wrong environment?
It suggests the problem isn't our physiology, it's our ecology. And you can't fight millions of years of evolution with 45 minutes on a treadmill. You have to change the environment.
Something to think about next time you're staring at that treadmill console. Thanks for diving in with us.
A real pleasure.
See you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.